Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and this is a bit of news for all you Kaiju figure collectors out there. We have two bits of news dropping from two different companies, and I will start with the bit of news that came first from Titanic Creations. There were plans, you might recall, for two major releases. First, an articulated figure of Titanic Creations' first original kaiju, Titanicus, as well as a cityscape, the first of what was planned to be several scenery areas that could go with the figures. Then, things became a little uncertain. The figure was delayed indefinitely, and that was the last update we heard. Well, that's what we heard until recently. On the 22nd, the Titanicus figure officially went live on the revamped Titanic Creations website. It is now in the crowdfunding process. Still very early, but as usual, they've got a list of stretch goals that they want to include with the figure. Now, I've covered all of their standard figures, the figures that weren't vinyl, but which were basically kind of like the movie monster series vinyl figures, only made of PVC, so they were a tiny bit more durable, but more solid. And I thought they were really good. And since they've gone into the articulated figures, I've really been impressed. Now, this figure, the Titanicus one, is $99, just like all their other articulated figures have been. And yes, I know that's not cheap, but considering the amount of stuff that Titanic Creations usually tries to include with the figure, that's actually not so bad. Let me give you an example, just in case this is your first time hearing about this sort of thing. So this is an SH Monster Arts figure, the only Monster Arts specific figure I've got in my collection. It's the Rebirth Gamera. It's a pretty solid figure, good articulation. It's not bad. What does it come with, though? Well, you get the main figure. You get two wings and an alternate bottom shell piece to put him into flight mode, and a flight stand. That's it. You don't even get a fireball effect, which I would think the fireball would be the bare minimum to include with a Gamera figure. And that cost $135. Again, not cheap, and you get some stuff that's admittedly not bad, but it doesn't quite feel like enough. Here we have the Hiya Toys exquisite basic articulated Godzilla figure, specifically the King of the Monsters Godzilla. And Hiya will be coming up a little bit later in this video. Again, solid figure, good articulation. This is actually their second attempt at Godzilla, where they listened to feedback and improved the neck joints. And what does this figure come with? Well, it's $55, and what you see is what you get. $55, of course, is significantly cheaper than what you would pay for the Monster Arts figure. Way, way cheaper, less than half. But if you want a Heat Ray, well, the Heat Ray version is a completely different figure that you gotta get. Similar deal with this Fig Zero Shin Ultraman, which is also super articulated. He comes with, I think, 4 different sets of hands. We have the fists attached here, but there's also open hands, sort of neutral hands, and the straight out flight hands. And that's it. No specium beam, nothing. Same price as the Hiya Godzilla figure, but no effects. Now moving on to Titanic Creations, again, all of their figures are in the $99 range. They started with Gorgo, which is also their first licensed figure and the first articulated figure, if not first proper figure at all, of this character. What did Gorgo come with? Gorgo came with a baby Gorgo, a destructible Big Ben clock tower, 3 planes with stand, a diving bell, and an alternate head with glow-in-the-dark eyes. Then they moved on to Yongari. What did Yongari come with? Flame breath effect, laser horn effect, 3 jets and a helicopter with stand, 3 tanks, a pagoda, 3 oil tanks, and a destructible bridge. Then we had Pulgazari, which is supposed to be Pulgasari, but getting the rights to stuff from North Korea is complicated. And that's all I'm going to leave it at. What did Pulgazari come with? an extra pair of hands that are balled up into fists, a baby Pulgazari, and 2 destructible skyscrapers with a road base. So, you can see they really do try to include as much as they possibly can, if they get enough orders. Titanicus is supposed to come with a breath effect, because he has the ice beam, some extra sets of hands, a destroyed boat, and possibly other stuff depending on how many of those stretch goals are reached. I think some of those were even teased at their display at G-Fest. So, I personally think Titanic Creations is worth it. You can watch my previous videos if you want to know more. I mean, I would have shown you the other things that the figures come with, but I've only got so much space here sitting at my computer to load stuff. So if you're looking for some really good collectibles that provide a lot of bang for your buck, I think Titanic Creations is worth supporting. And that's not a paid advertisement or anything. I just genuinely like what they're doing. Plus, Titanicus is an original kaiju. Their first original kaiju, because they started with him as one of their standard figures. And if that figure does well, that means we could also get articulated figures of the other 3, Spherodon, Scoreus, and Graphixus. Plus, who knows how many other monsters, both new and familiar, might be down the pipe. So check that out. I mean, again, if you can afford to do it, you should never spend beyond your means. But I do think that this figure is probably going to be pretty darn good. It's also going to be their biggest, so that's something to look forward to. Now, I also said that Hiya Toys was going to be coming up later in the video, and this is the announcement they recently did. They had a recent display at a convention revealing some of their new figures that are coming forward. They did reveal their first of the Monster Hunter figures, because they recently got the license for that. But our focus here is Godzilla and Kaiju and whatnot. So, first of all, with their classic line, because they have been branching out into classic monsters, classic Toho recently, they have 2 reveals. First is Burning Godzilla, which I find it very ironic that they decided to just display the Heisei Godzilla figure unpainted, because Burning Godzilla is pretty much 99% identified by the color. But I'm not surprised that Burning Godzilla is coming along. Every time there's a Heisei Godzilla figure released, a Burning Godzilla figure isn't too far behind. Burning Godzilla sells well. I don't know why. It's kind of morbid if you really think too hard about it, but it's always something that happens. They're even doing the action figures, like the ones. A Burning Godzilla is coming from that too. They also, however, surprised everyone by announcing a figure of Monster X from Godzilla Final Wars. I don't think anybody saw that coming. They did not announce a Final Wars Godzilla, although I'm pretty sure they're going to at some point. Although they can hold off on it as far as I'm concerned. I think we have enough Godzilla variants from them for the moment. But Monster X is a big surprise. They might have gone with Monster X because he's technically the proto-form of Kaiser Ghidorah, and Kaiser Ghidorah technically is different from King Ghidorah, but also sort of in that same vein. But still, Monster X on his own, that's quite a surprise. It shows that Hiya might actually be willing to branch out a little bit and make figures of certain monsters beyond the big five. I'm hoping they do. I mean, I've said in the past, like over on TwitX and stuff, that I'd like to see them tackle some of the lesser known monsters. You know, they have a GMK Godzilla, so the opportunity is right there for them to do GMK Baragon, for example. Baragon, I don't think, has really gotten a proper articulated figure since the Reveltech one that you can't find anymore. And, you know, that one had the huge ball joints everywhere anyway. So that's a pretty good sign for their classic line. But it's in the MonsterVerse side of things that they really surprised us, as they revealed 4 new figures: Scar King, Tiamat, the Warbat, and Behemoth. Yeah, that's right, Behemoth. Now, it was announced a while ago that Hiya did want to make as many MonsterVerse figures as possible. Of course, they've done a boatload of Godzilla variations, followed closely by multiple Kong variations, and, you know, then they have the Ghidorahs, the Skullcrawlers, Rodan, and Mothra. Still no Mechagodzilla, surprisingly. But then they've started branching out with Shimo, and recently surprised everyone with Sela. And we were hoping that was a sign of other things to come. Now we know for certain. Scar King, of course, was going to be obvious. You know, like I said, they did Shimo. GXK is the most recent of the movies, so naturally they're going to try to get stuff from that. But it's Behemoth that I think is really surprising people. Behemoth is a fan favorite. He's, even though he barely has 30 seconds worth of screen time in the movie, people were drawn to him just based on his interesting design. And of course, the graphic novel chapter devoted to him in MonsterVerse Declassified did a lot to expand on how he fits into the world. So people have been wanting a Behemoth figure for a very long time, while also figuring that he probably wasn't that high of a priority. You know, the companies that make the super expensive statues might make one every once in a while. There was that tiny little one that Playmates released in conjunction with Godzilla vs. Kong, even though Behemoth wasn't in the movie, or maybe he was at some point, I don't know. But there has been no 6-inch figure of him, certainly. Nothing from Bandai's Movie Monster series or SH Monster Arts. And now Hiya's making a Behemoth figure, in addition to a Scar King and a Warbat and a Tiamat that looks to be very accurate. I don't know how they're going to articulate her at this point. Maybe she'll be a bendable figure. Maybe the body will be segmented. This appears to be a resin statue for display, but this is supposed to be an articulated figure. It says on the label, exquisite basic. So that's going to be interesting. And again, I think Hiya has proven itself in the realm of making articulated kaiju figures. Yes, they've kind of been milking it with the different recolors and variations and stuff, but the quality is still really good, and for a lower price than Monster Arts. And now they're branching out in ways of making figures that you're not going to find from Monster Arts. So that's something to look forward to as well. It's probably going to take a while to get here, especially where you order it from. You know, Hiya's release in the West has been known to be kind of glacially slow at times, especially depending on where you order it from. But so far, they've all been worth the wait. So there you go. Multiple articulated figures on the horizon, one of them from an independent company, one of them from a company that's certainly giving Monster Arts a run for its money. And if you're a collector like I am, you're already feeling it in your wallet. But, hey, we're collectors, right? Anyway, just keeping you guys updated. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.